Welcome to the All Things Endurance podcast. I'm your host, Rick Prince, and I'm excited to have on the podcast today Dr. Andrew Fix. Andrew is a physical therapist. He's an orthopedic clinical specialist, as well as a director of clinical operations at the Physio Room, which also happens to be the place where I'm doing my physical therapy with Dr. Andrew Fix. The Physio Room is a Colorado-based physical therapy practice, and they have multiple locations in the Front Range. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Yeah, Rick, thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to hop on here and chat with you. And as you just mentioned, I appreciate your trust in the team and I at Physio Room to help take care of you.
Yeah, I should also note that my business partner Cindy is also goes to see Andrew, so he is the man. Um, so today we're going to be discussing recovery modalities. There's a lot of stuff out there from compression boots to foam rollers to percussion.
Mm.
There's a million things out there, in
Yeah.
addition to other things like cold plunges. So I feel like there's probably no one better than a physical therapist, specifically Dr. Fix, to discuss this stuff. So, Andrew, before we get into it, maybe you could give our listeners a little bit more about your background.
Yeah, for sure. I'd be happy to. Thanks again for having me, Andrew Fix. I'm a physical therapist, and it was, back in high school when I decided that's what I wanted to do. Just like so many of us, PTs, I had my own injury and recovery story that kind of led me down this path. I was first introduced to physical therapy as a client when I was in eighth grade. I didn't know at the time what this was, but I had what's called an avulsion fracture on my pelvis or like in my hip. And that's basically where a tendon pulls really hard on the bone, creates a little chip off of the bone, and needed to be on crutches. Went to physical therapy for a few weeks before I got back to playing football. But in eighth grade, I didn't know what I wanted to do, right? Like I wasn't sure I wanted to go to PT school. So then fast forward to my senior year of high school, I had the opportunity to shadow by this time the physical therapy clinic that my dad was going to after he had rotator cuff surgery. And then I had a minor injury. I had a knee sprain, an MCL sprain in wrestling in practice in high school. And that caused me to miss half of my senior season of wrestling. Got recovered, healed up, still did pretty well, but it was still a bummer to miss half of my senior season. And that was when the light switch finally flipped.
Mm.
I decided this is what I've got to go to school for. So I pursued an orthopedic residency program after school was over. That's what started my moving around the country. And at this point, I've had the opportunity to be from Wisconsin, move to the Atlanta suburbs, move to the Chicago suburbs, move to the Kansas City suburbs, like you and I were just talking about, and then now we're out here in the suburbs of Denver, Colorado. So I've been a PT for over 10 years at this point, and at this point in my career, I do a lot of the out of office stuff, the community engagement activities, which is actually where Cindy and I met at a movement-based workshop we were holding. And I work with a lot of running athletes. I mean, out here in Colorado, there's just so many people that are runners, hikers, cyclists, and those are the types of people that we work with.
That's awesome. It's so interesting how people get into these certain fields. I know for me, I took an elective just by chance in high school. It was athletic training,
Yeah,
and that while I didn't do athletic training, it led me, my interest in the body to kinesiology to go to Springfield College. But it's so funny how there are these certain points in people's careers that kind of lead them down certain paths. I love that story.
totally. Yeah, yeah, 100%. And I think it's very easy, I think, in the type of profession that I find myself in, it's something that you get a lot of personal satisfaction with, right? We kind of joke that nobody goes into physical therapy, or at least they probably shouldn't, if their goal is to just be rich, right? Like you want to be a billionaire. That's probably not the most efficient way to go do that. But it's a type of position where we get a lot of personal enjoyment and satisfaction out of what we do. And I think the people that don't, I don't know, that aren't really passionate about being a physical therapist, they find their way out of the profession within a handful
Mm,
of years after they're working. And I think this is one that like I just can't really imagine anything else that I would do.
yeah.
All of what I do is not just working with clients, but at the end of the day, it's still about you know, helping people, helping the world move better, like we like to say at Physio Room, one person at a time.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So as we sort of spoke of during the introduction, there are near endless recovery tools out there, and I feel
Yeah.
like perhaps the influencer culture hasn't really helped in that regard, where everything's always being marketed and pitched, and do this and you won't have any pain. And
Yeah.
um, so, from a macro point of view, do you think a lot of these tools, for lack of a better word, kind of have long-term effects, or are they more for sort of from an acute standpoint? And I know that's sort of a very, very general, question. I'm sure you could drill down much lower, but just from sort of a topical standpoint, just
Yeah.
want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great question. And I think, as you mentioned on like the influencer side of things, it's really popular right now to talk about all these things.
Yeah.
We're coming up on Christmas. I've seen countless ads for these types of things, compression boots and massage guns. From that macro level, like you asked, there are relatively transient changes that these things stimulate in our bodies.
Okay.
They help short term. Um, they're not going to help. Like if you do some foam rolling today, you're not really still going to be feeling the effects of that 2 weeks from now, right? Now, if you do it every single day, yeah, you might feel different 2 weeks from now. But short term, I think the long term benefits are going to come from all of the stuff that we know is really important: sleep, managing our stress, what we're fueling and putting in our body, how we're hydrating, how we're training. Those are the long term things, and then the other stuff is going to help, generally speaking, in the short term.
Yeah, gotcha. And I think because, a lot of the stuff is marketed so much
Mhm.
and, there's money to be made off these products. There's not really money to be made off of, sleep, getting more sleep. Well,
Sure.
maybe there
Yeah.
is. But in your practice, do you find that a lot of people sort of negate all those core basics like sleep, eating well, enough recovery, and instead maybe they sleep, 4 hours a night and they do all these things, but they spend millions of dollars on all the recovery tools thinking that's going to be the magic bullet.
Yeah, great question. I think if I just were to give you a really short answer, I would say yes, but of course there's some nuance to that, right? Like I don't think anybody goes into their week with the goal of not getting enough sleep,
Yeah,
right? So like the answer is yes, but people don't do this on purpose, right? People do this out of A, necessity, B, convenience. Like my wife and I were in the phase where we have a newborn at home, we have a toddler at home. We're getting less than what we would prefer from a sleep standpoint, and we have
sure.
more than we would prefer from like a life stress standpoint. But we're not doing that intentionally. Like we'd love to be
Right.
sleeping more, we'd love to have a little less stress. Um, so I think the answer is yes. I think we live very busy lives. We live on the go lives that forces people to eat out of convenience and sleep when they can. We have cell phones and things in our hands all the time, so we're constantly inundated with distractions and stressors and notifications popping up. But the truth of the matter is you cannot out recovery tool your lifestyle, right?
Yeah,
So no foam roller, no massage gun, no cold plunge is going to negate the negative effects of all like lacking in those other areas. But that doesn't mean they don't help a little bit. So,
sure.
like one thing that I had jumped on pretty strongly a few years ago that I've kind of like backed off on some now is that cold plunge, the ice bath side of things. And over the last few years, what we've found is Hmm. The adding to our life from a longevity standpoint as it relates to cold plunges. The science is just not really there to support that that's what happens.
Okay.
Much stronger when you talk about saunas, right? Like saunas have much more known benefits from research studies on the cardiovascular benefits, improving our life, particularly if you're using the sauna like 3 times, 20 minutes a week. That can have great cardiovascular benefits and decrease the likelihood that you're going to die, right, of some cardiovascular event. Cold plunges or ice baths, the benefits there are much more from like a mood standpoint, right? A
Mm,
stress relief standpoint in the short term. It's not necessarily going to add years to your life. However, I fall in the category where if somebody feels benefit from doing cold plunges and that takes their stress down for a portion of the day, or that makes their mood feel more positive for a portion of the day, that's a phenomenal thing. And that could improve all sorts of other areas of your life, like
sure.
relationships with your spouse or your kids or your coworkers. Um, it's probably not adding years to your life, but it's probably going to add some benefit to your day, and maybe help you structure some routine that you really enjoy. So yeah, I think still use all of those modalities. I don't think you need to break the bank and spend tons of money on all of the different tools, right? You can get by pretty efficiently from a financial standpoint. But from a priority standpoint, definitely prioritize those other things first and the recovery items second.
Yeah, yeah. And it's so interesting. And the reason I was asking that primarily as well is, the sport that I do primarily is cycling, and there's so
Yeah.
many widgets and gadgets to buy out there.
Oh,
And they're all crazy expensive. And what we find, or what I find talking to a lot of these coaches and everything is, the cyclists will sort of not really focus on the key things like bike fitting and proper
yeah.
training plans, but they'll buy you know, the $300 carbon fiber water bottle, maybe at the back of their
Yeah.
mind, knowing that it's not really going to help them, but they just want it to look cool. But it's just
Yeah.
so interesting to me how these sort of marginal gains often get pushed to the forefront from a performance standpoint or looking cool standpoint or whatever you want to call it. It's sort of
Yeah.
interesting to me.
It looks cool and, for lack of a better term, it's easier,
It
right?
is.
It's easier to spend a little bit of money on something that you don't have to do work for
Yeah.
and hope that it's going to provide you with some benefit that is equal to other things that you could do that are going to take a little bit of work and effort for you to do. That might not be as cool
Yeah.
or as mainstream or something like that. But typically, those things that are easier have a smaller benefit threshold, and they might make tiny changes, but they're not going to make the level of change that those other priority items could.
Yeah. For sure. For
I
sure.
like to think of it like a pyramid, Rick. Like if we have the sports recovery pyramid, all of those modality things are at the top of the pyramid. And
Yep.
at the base layers of the pyramid are the sleep, the nutrition, the managing your stress. Like if we work our way up the pyramid, um, what we're fueling our body with, and all the other stuff falls in that tip of the pyramid.
Yeah. Great analogy. Great
Mhm.
analogy. Um, so a lot of athletes, again, kind of going back to the modality, sort of self-treat, injuries or sort of the niggles that they get with
Yeah.
those things, versus seeing a professional like yourself, physical therapist or whatnot. What is the point, would you say, for an athlete, a lot of the listeners to this podcast are coaches, as far, advising on athletes,
Yeah.
that they should, okay, you know what, I should probably see if I should probably see a professional. I probably shouldn't just keep foam rolling or, doing whatever I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. And I'll start this answer by saying I am right there with you because long before I was a physical therapist, and still now that I am, I was an athlete first. And I was a human that's running around playing with my friends first, dealing with things, right? Aches and pains, knee pain from running, or shoulder pain from throwing a ball, or whatever that is. Nobody knows your body better than you do at the end of the day. You know how
Mhm.
things feel, you know how you respond to certain activities better than any of us can, any other person can. So that's first and foremost. I get this asked this question a lot when I go to places like running stores or talk to coaches at gyms or fitness facilities. And typically how we answer this question is if you've been dealing with something and you've been trying to address it, right? You have knee pain, you've been trying to foam roll your quad and do um, some strength exercises for your quad tendon or your hamstrings or whatnot, and you've been doing that for about 2 weeks and it is not feeling better. That is the time you need to go seek out some professional assistance. And the reason I say 2 weeks is that gets us out of that like very acute phase of the irritation. And now we're entering what we call like subacute phase, right? After those first few days, it's no longer what we call acute. Um, it's not chronic yet. That's, when we start passing like the 3 month threshold, that's when we call it chronic. Um, so you're in that subacute phase. You've tried to do some things. It's not going away. Let's get some assistance. And, you should probably do that in any area of your life, right? Like whatever you're working on, if you're not getting the success that you want, invest in a coach or a mentor or something so that you can get to from point A to point B faster. Now, of course, I'm a little bit biased because I am the one working with these people. And what we know is it is so much easier for us and for you, whoever it is that's dealing with the ache or pain, to address it the sooner we can jump on it, right? So, like if someone developed knee pain and I was able to see them really quickly, like within the first few days, it's going to be so much easier for us to address that issue. It's going to cost less money, it's going to take less time. So the selfish answer for everyone is like, we want to see you right away.
Yeah.
Now that does not mean like anytime something bothers you, you need to get your PT or your physician or something on the phone. But I think it should at least be in the back of your mind because what we don't want to happen is we don't want the compensations to start happening. We don't want the compensations in your movement to start happening. We don't want the compensations in your life to start happening. Like, we don't want you to start avoiding things because of this pain you're dealing with. We don't want you to start making different choices of how you would spend your day, who you would spend it with because of this knee pain. Like, if you're skipping workouts or you're skipping going on that walk with your spouse or something, or the hike that your child wanted to go on, like, we want to address those things because it's going to impact your life in more ways than just having knee pain. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, but I would say 2 weeks, but preferably as soon as possible.
Okay. So one question I didn't have that I was going to ask you, but sort of ancillary to this, you see, there's all those funny like Instagram memes out there, right? Where like, doctor told me not to run, and then they're out there like in a crutch, right? Or they're out there
Yeah.
running in a cast. Do you think that a lot of people in the back of their mind, okay, I know I need to go see a PT. This has been bothering me for 2 weeks. But oh man, if I see that doctor or PT, they're going to tell me not to run, and I can't not run because
Yeah.
that's my entire life, and therefore they don't go to see the PT. Do you think is that a thing? Do you think?
I do think it's a thing, and I love
Okay.
that you talked about runners when you like brought up that question because I think that is probably the group of people or the population of exercisers that it's the strongest for. That
Yeah.
like that feeling is the strongest for because everyone wants to do their sport or activity, but man, runners want to run. And
Yeah.
if you tell them not to run, they're going to be like very disinterested in coming back to you in the future. So yes, I think it's a thing. B, I think part of the reason that it's a thing is, especially with running, I think there still is this I don't know, stigma or perception in society that like in some ways running is bad for you.
Yeah.
Like, running is bad for your knees or running is bad for your other joints or whatnot. And if we look at literature, that's just not a fact. That is just not true to say that running is bad for you. Now, we could make the case that if someone's running with like completely terrible running form, because running is a skill, just like all other activities, throwing, shooting a basketball, like those are skills. You can get better at them. You can get better and more efficient at running too. But if you're trained appropriately, your program is designed appropriately, you're doing those other things, you're sleeping and you're fueling adequately, running is not inherently bad for you. So that could be a great activity for somebody. I think the idea that if you go to a provider, and especially without them doing an extremely thorough evaluation with you, they just blanket tell you to stop doing a certain activity because that will help your symptoms. I think you should turn around and go find a different provider. Like, we joke about this with the physician's office, but not all physicians would say this, but someone's like, "Oh, my shoulder hurts when I do this." Reach up overhead and they say, "Ah, well, just don't do that for a few weeks and it'll feel better."
Right.
That's not an answer to why your shoulder hurts when you do that activity. That's what we need to find. We need to find why it hurts. Like, what's the root cause of the issue? Is it how you're doing it? Is it that you have a lack of mobility, you have a lack of strength? Is it, what's the reason? Let's address that, not just change the symptoms. So I think that's first and foremost. Like, if somebody comes to our office or most physical therapists that I know, we're not going to tell them to stop doing their activity unless we really think it's necessary. And I always use the example of if we think someone has a stress fracture, we're going to tell them to stop running until we can get some imaging and determine if someone truly does have a stress fracture. But that's one of like the only scenarios where we're actually going to say that, right? If we think it's a soft tissue ailment, that's what most people are dealing with. We want you to continue to train while we work through the issue. Like, we don't
Hmm.
we don't want to take you out of your training because there's many more benefits than just the physical exercise that come from that. There's mental benefits, there's the relational benefits, like being part of a community if you're like running with friends or something. And we don't want to pull people from that stuff unless we absolutely have to for their own, physical well-being if we think something more serious is going on.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And I think, so many people, I think, view injury, in isolation, sort of in this
Yeah.
siloed thing versus, to your point, all these other benefits, the how it makes them feel, the social component. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. Um, so, while next question, I kind of hesitated to put it down, but I felt like given our audience, it's probably a terrible question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Yeah.
And while it's individually based, if if someone were going to purchase, say, three recovery tools, and maybe
Hmm.
they have a budget of, $100 or whatever, which ones would you say might be of the most value? Again, knowing that, of course, that it is sort of individually based, but again, sort of that macro blanket sort of point of view.
Ooh, this is a great question.
Yeah. Probably a
Um,
really bad one, but ask it
no, and
anyway.
no, and I mean, for all of you that are listening to this, Rick had sent me these questions ahead of time, but I did not pre-script any answers, so I don't have anything written down for this. So I think what I would say is, if you had to boil it down to three, and I think you said like a budget of $100 or something, I would say one of those should probably be a foam roller. Um, they're very easy to come by. They're relatively inexpensive, and I would probably go with one that's in that like medium firmness. I would not get the extremely hard one, and I would not get one that's pillow soft either. Probably like in the middle, and I would go with the full length foam roller, the 3 foot one, as opposed to a shorter one, just because you can use it for more things. Yes, it takes up a little bit more space in your house or in your car or like wherever it is, but you can use it for more things when it's a little bit longer. And I think from a basic level, knowing how and having an understanding of how to do some basic body maintenance when it comes to tissue work is something that everyone should know how to do, right? Particularly anyone who's trying to be athletic and do physical activities on a regular basis. So foam roller number one. If you were going to buy one of these for your house, it would not fit within the budget, but so many facilities have these now. I think a sauna has great recovery benefits to it. And the reason I'll still throw that in is so many gyms now have a sauna, or so many of your friends might have a sauna, and you don't necessarily have to buy one for your own home in order to benefit from going and using one. So, like for example, my parents just signed up for a gym membership. It's $20 a month. They have access to the sauna there. So they could basically go for a year and use the sauna, and it fits within that $100 budget or something.
Got it.
Because it only adds about $100 a year to their membership to have that tier or that level. And then number three, hmm, three recovery tools. I mean, honestly, I might not have said this a year ago, but I think having a very comfortable pillow that works well for you would fall in there as like one of the top three most important recovery tools, because I know for myself, if I'm not sleeping well, my body hurts more, right? The,
Yeah.
the less sleep I'm getting, the more I physically am sore. I just recently, about 3 months ago, bought a new pillow. My neck feels so much better since I
Mm,
invested in that different pillow. I think it cost me like $50. So I would say those might be the three things: a foam roller, some time in the sauna, and a really comfortable pillow that is like feels good for you. Because if we can just help you get even a tiny bit more sleep or quality sleep, you're going to feel so much better. And there's no other recovery device that's going to like replace the ability to get a like little bit extra sleep.
yeah. I love that you said pillow because again, it's something you can buy, but again, it goes back to those core, important things like,
Mm.
sleep, nutrition, so on and so forth. It's so funny. My wife, I always joke, is like that princess and the pea. Like she we could literally, if it were illegal, to go into business reselling pillows. We must have like 20 pillows. And everyone she's like, oh, this is perfect in the store. And then she brings it home. She's like, no, no, can't do it. And then she gets
Yeah.
another one. And so it's so funny, like how, how I guess nuanced that is as far as feeling good and, being
Yep.
able to get quality sleep.
So individualized, right?
Yeah,
Like, the pillow that's comfortable for you might not be comfortable for me, or my wife's pillow, I might not like it. And it depends. Like, do you enjoy sleeping on your back? Do you enjoy sleeping on your side, your stomach? Because you're gonna, probably prefer a different pillow based on those things too.
for sure. For sure. So, as a physical therapist, what are some of the maybe the top three mistakes that you see athletes making with respect to recovery? And maybe it kind of goes over a lot of things that we've already talked about, like not getting enough sleep and so on and so forth. But I didn't know if if you kind of had to rank them, those top three things that you think as a whole, some of your clients and athletes just aren't doing well.
Hmm. Yeah, and just like one of the other questions earlier, I will just want to relate to everybody and throw in there that I am guilty of this too, what I'm about to say. I feel like half the time when I'm explaining something or answering something with a client, like I'm also saying it for myself, right?
Yeah,
We all need these things. I think some of the most common mistakes that get made are one, just expecting that time is going to take it away when you're dealing with something, just thinking that it's going to go away. Like, my ankle's bothering me. I don't have to worry about it. It'll warm up. It'll go away, and like not actually doing anything about it. Because what we know is like if you don't do something about it, it usually doesn't go away. At least not when you're an adult, right? Like
Yeah.
maybe when you were 18, something kind of goes away. But when you're 45, that's very different, right?
Yeah.
Like things linger around a lot longer. And if you don't treat it, I don't want to say like treat it seriously as in like it's like a life or death issue, but like if you don't take it seriously, it's probably not going to go away.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably number one. Number two is not spending enough time on warm up and cool down activities.
Okay.
Focusing on the workout, which of course is the meat of your exercise session, right? But the purposes of the warm up and cool down, I don't think can be understated. Again, especially as someone gets older, their life changes. In today's day and age, you spend a lot more time sitting on the computer. You spend a lot more time taking care of your kids. Like you're not the same person from a movement standpoint as you probably were 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. You need to do different things to prepare your body for the movement or for the exercise that you're going to do. So I use this um, like kind of line graph analogy for people. Like if you were younger, you can spend a short amount of time on your warm up, a short amount of time on your cool down, and a big chunk of time on your actual workout. But as time progresses, I think the amount of time on your warm up needs to get longer. The amount of time for your cool down needs to get longer, and the workout time gets just a little bit smaller and more efficient, like more targeted. What are we doing? Why are we doing that? Because the purpose of the warm up is to prepare you for today, right? Prepare you for the training that you're going to do today to make sure it's high quality. And one, like to make sure that you're prepared for it from a mental standpoint. Like if you start to go through your warm up and for whatever reason you're just not into it today, maybe that's a day that you take off from training and push that to the next day. Because if you're looking forward to exercise, doing that warm up should only make you more interested in doing your training session, not less. And then the purposes of the cool down is to prepare you for tomorrow or prepare you for your next training session, right? And I don't think you can skip those things. Like if your goal is to train for years, those are so important. And so often I talk to runners or cyclists who say, like, I have an hour to work out. I want to bike for an hour. I say, awesome. Can you give me a 5 minute warm up and a 5 minute cool down and bike for 50 minutes?
Mm.
And sometimes people say yes, and sometimes people say no. And when they say no, we have to start to unpack like why. Because if we do a 5 minute warm up and a 5 minute cool down, and you have a really high quality 50 minutes, that is so much better than a 60-minute time period where the first 10 of that is spent like just trying to get loosened up and going. Like
Yeah.
you can be way more efficient with your 50. So that's number two, warm ups and cool downs. And then number three, I think, is um, focusing on intensity instead of focusing on consistency. You're not going to get yourself in shape for a race or an event with one workout. You're not going to burn a bunch of calories to help you from a body composition standpoint with one workout. Like there is no amount of intensity in one day that is going to be more important than consistency over a period of time. And I think you have to remember that going into things like there's weekend warriors and all sorts of things, right? Like consistency is the name of the game, no matter what you're training for, whether it's strength training or running or cycling, or you name it, swimming. Consistency is so much more important than intensity. And consistency is what helps you build up the resilience in your tissues. It's what helps you build up the tolerance in your tendons, in your joints, in your bones. Intensity, when you like pull that lever too strongly, when you're not prepared for it, that's what leads to an injury happening. When the
Yeah.
intensity is higher than what the capacity of the tissue was, whether that's a tendon, a ligament, a bone. Um, so don't focus on intensity, focus on consistency and be smart when you pull the lever of intensity because we do need to from time to time, but just be smart with just make sure your body's prepared for it before you do it because once you pull that lever, you can't go back. Like you can't erase that hard sprint you just did if you weren't prepared for it.
Yeah, that's a great message. I think so many people focus on that, that one magical workout, and and then it's 3 days off, and then it's another magical workout, and then
Yeah.
next thing you know, they're in your office. It's so funny you said that about age and recovery. I had this when I was living in New York City. I had this like weird moment where, um, when I was a kid, like to your point, when you're 17, you don't need that much warm up and recovery. I remember like we would go on these bike rides and I'd attack right from the gun. And, the old guys would be like, slow down, damn it, it's a warm up. And then years later, I was in New York. I was riding across the GW Bridge. And then as soon as we got across the bridge, one of the riders from the West Point cycling team just took off. And I'm like, slow down, damn it. I'm like, oh my God, I'm that guy. I'm that old guy who needs, it was
My
like
how,
this out of body experience.
my how the times have changed.
Oh my goodness. It is so true.
That's funny.
Um, so what are some of the top recovery myths out there that you see in whether it be myths or protocols that have been, debunked? They're kind of what you said about like running's bad for the knees, that kind of thing, but more on the recovery side that don't seem to die. Athletes are still doing it, coaches are still recommending these. Anything like that you see in your office a lot?
Yeah, I think the answer to this question is like maybe the easiest of all the questions that you've asked so
Okay.
far.
Okay.
Because and it's one that I think most people are going to be familiar with, right? Most people probably know that RICE principle,
Yeah.
the RICE, rest, ice, compress, and elevate. And that was something that I was preaching big time to myself and to other people back when I was in high school, college. Like I was following those recommendations. I would have ice on my shins after track practice, almost like every college track practice.
Yeah.
And nowadays, we do not recommend that to people almost ever. Like
Mm.
we almost never use ice in our office. We almost are never using like heating pads and things in our office. Now, if I had to choose between the two, I'd choose a heating pad 10 out of 10 times.
Okay.
But when we just think about icing, because I think that's my main answer to this question is like icing things, particularly when you're dealing with an acute or even worse, if you're dealing with like a chronic issue that has been there for quite a while, you do not need to be icing this. We need the blood flow as much as possible to that area to help bring what we call healing mediators, healing nutrients through the bloodstream to that damaged tissue site to help it heal. And if we're going to ice all the time, we're slowing that down. We're kicking the can down the road when it comes to healing.
Okay.
So we don't want to do that. Now, there's other parts of the RICE protocol, rest, compression, elevation. Those could all be very beneficial depending on the circumstance or the situation that's going on. But icing and taking anti-inflammatory medications all the time, those are things that I would caution pretty much everyone against when it comes to if your goal is to have an area heal, those two things are going to slow it down.
Okay.
So instead of RICE, what we tell people now is a much longer acronym, but it's a lot more all-encompassing. And it's two words, peace and love. PEACE, LOVE. And if we like unpack what that means, peace, the P stands for protect. So like we want to protect the injured area. If you sprain your ankle, don't jump right back on the court expecting that your ankle is just going to be fine. We may need to use a brace. We may need to take it easy for a few days. Notice we said protect, not necessarily rest and not use it at all, but protect it from getting re-injured. Elevate can still be great for helping reduce excessive swelling. Avoid, A is for avoid anti-inflammatories and ice. So back to the rice part, avoid those two things. The C is still for compression, and the E, the other E, is for educate. So like it's our job or it's your job as the one who's dealing with the injury to educate yourself on what you can do about it, or it's our job to educate clients on how you can start to heal this area and what the healing trajectory should look like. So that's what you do in those first few days. Like that's the acute
Okay.
phase. Then when we start getting past that, the LOVE is for the next, several weeks as we're really working on like getting back to normal. L is for load. We want to gradually return to the activity guided by your pain, build strength of that area so we can get it back to what you need to do. O is for optimism. It's, what you think about, you bring about. And if you believe deep down that your ankle is not going to get better, then it's probably going to take longer to get better if it gets better at all. So you have to be optimistic about the comeback, right? V is for vascularization. So like we were talking about a little bit ago with ice and NSAIDs, we want the blood flow to that area. We want to do things that are going to promote it to be there. And you can do this soon after an injury. Like, is there some type of pain-free cardio that you can do? We want you to do that. So, like, if somebody um, has shoulder pain, but they can ride the bike, stationary bike, without that bothering their shoulder at all, that would be a phenomenal exercise to do because that blood flow facilitation is not just happening in the legs, it's happening throughout your whole body. And then E is for exercise. So load, optimism, vascularization, and exercise. We want to incorporate those targeted exercises for strength, balance, mobility, like whatever area you're lacking in, or what led to you dealing with that injury in the first place. We need to keep exercising as much as we can despite having the injury, and then make sure we're exercising and addressing the actual injury site, strengthening, supporting the area around it. Um, yeah, I think that's like if you can wrap your head around that, I think that could go an extremely long way to helping somebody aside from just like the old school thoughts of I need to rest this, I need to ice everything or ice for 20 minutes on and off throughout the whole day. If we can like break our um, hold on that, that's the way that we've always done things, and instead think about what does the body actually need to heal? How can I give it that? And I think it makes a huge, huge difference.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And I'm just always shocked, whether it be training things or recovery things, how even though the data is out there and it's, gets more, kind of noted by the public, a lot of these things just don't die. It's just
Yeah.
use ice, right? Just do it's
Yeah.
it's so fascinating to me. Um,
One more thing
oh
that I
yeah.
just thought of that also I think, and I don't think this is as big of a deal as what we just talked about, but I think the idea that stretching is going to fix everything is
Hmm.
also another one of those mistakes or common protocols that I see, and I've been guilty of that too, that I like see people doing. Like stretching is not always the answer to the irritation that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
It could be a piece of the puzzle when it comes to getting things to feel better. But what we need to check is, just like if someone has high blood pressure, giving them blood pressure medication doesn't address the reason why you have the high blood pressure in the first
Right.
place. Even if stretching helps something feel a little bit better, that doesn't mean it's addressing the actual root of the issue. If you don't actually lack range of motion and lack the flexibility, then stretching is probably not what you need. Way more often in our office, we end up helping people with strength and stability of tissues rather than length and flexibility of issue.
Hmm.
And when it comes to training for activities like running, cycling, these are not things that require a ton of mobility, right? They're very repetitive activities over and over and over again in a portion of the range of motion.
Yeah.
They're not pushing you to the ends of your range of motion in either direction. So usually stretching is not not the solution. It's usually strengthening because if we can have the resilience and the tolerance or capacity of the tissue to handle the load that you're putting on it, that's typically how we're gonna stave off those injuries. So stretching is okay, but as you gain flexibility or as you gain length or range of motion, now we need to get strong and stable in that newfound range. So let's use the hamstrings for an example. Say you're stretching your hamstrings and it feels like that's loosening up some, I'll use air quotes, tightness that you have, because tightness in the medical field is like a slang term. It doesn't actually mean anything. Usually when someone says an area feels tight, they either mean A, that it has more tone, meaning it's like it's holding a higher resting tension, or B, that it is too short. It's lacking length. And for both of those things, we'll say something feels tight. It's usually A, it's usually that something has that higher resting tone and it feels tense. And stretching can be a way that we can decrease that. But usually, when someone has tight hamstrings and they stretch them over and over and over again, it usually doesn't permanently relieve the tightness. Like someone's been stretching their hamstrings for years and then they find themselves in our office and we oftentimes have them stop stretching their hamstrings and instead start strengthening their hamstrings through the length. So like take the example of a deadlift or a stability ball leg curl where your legs are up on the stability ball, you're up in a bridge and you're rolling the stability ball back and forth while the hamstrings are lengthening one way and shortening the other way with the load on them. that can help you maintain the length benefits that you get from the stretching because now you're strong throughout that range. Our brain is just really smart and it communicates through the nerves to the muscles. If you don't have the requisite stability to achieve a desired position of a joint, it is not going to let you go there under like normal fitness circumstances, unless you slip or something. But if you don't, you have to earn the right to do something from an activity standpoint that requires a lot of range motion. And stretching alone is usually not the solution.
Yeah, I love that perspective, and I think you really explained it really well. I really appreciate that. Um, so last question. This sort of relates exactly to what we were just talking about.
Mhm.
I think a lot of people view injury from a very, isolated point of view, like, okay, my ankle hurts, my hamstring hurts, versus viewing it from more of the systemic view, that something affects something else. Um, so I guess what would be your advice to people that, have a hamstring, their hamstrings are quote unquote tight or their ankle are tight, instead of just going out and buying that foam roller and going to town on the hamstring, like what would be your advice to that individual?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I feel like this question is pretty much like our whole job as physical therapists. I mean, maybe not our whole job, but a big portion of our job, right? Our job is to treat the human, the individual in front of us, not to treat the knee, not to treat the Achilles tendonitis. It's to treat the person.
Love it.
And and we want to figure out like what we think the root cause is. And sometimes it is that area. Like I think that's where you should always start in your mind is like, okay, you have ankle pain. Let's start by talking about what's been going on. When did your ankle start bothering you? Did you roll your ankle? Did you, like, was there an incident that happened? Especially when there was not an incident that happened. That's when we really need to start getting our alarm bells going off in our head of like, okay, you didn't roll your ankle. Now your ankle hurts and you can't think of a reason why that started. Okay, let's start unpacking things and try to figure out why it happened. The easiest way I could explain this probably is if we think about the joints, the muscles, and the nerves. So, like, let's take the ankle, for example. What are all of the areas that are most likely to impact the ankle? It's going to be the joints below it, above it. So, the muscles and joints of the foot, the knee, the hip, from like a joint and a tissue standpoint. The mechanics that are going on at the hip, the knee, and the foot can definitely impact what's going on at the ankle. And then from a nerve or an innervation standpoint, where does the signaling come from that affects how the ankle functions? Well, it comes from our lower back, right? All of the nerves that end up running down the leg to supply the tissues of the ankle, the muscles of the ankle with their ability to do anything, come from the lower back. So at the very least, you should be looking from the lower back down when it comes to addressing the ankle.
Okay.
And that doesn't solve like that doesn't address 100% of the things that are going on because we need to talk about the training and like all the other things that go into this. But from like a physical musculoskeletal standpoint, neuromusculoskeletal standpoint, that's going to help you address or figure out the vast majority of problems. And then if that's still not putting the puzzle together, then you need to be really thinking about all those other factors, the training, the nutrition, the sleep. Um, but I think this is so common. And I think even for providers, this is so common that we're dealing with our own physical ache or pain. We don't always think about it the same as we would if it was a client sitting in our office
Mm,
where we don't have as much bias when it comes to someone else's symptoms. We have a lot of
right.
bias when it comes to our own, right? Like
Sure.
we think we know what's going on, so we think we know exactly what to do about it. We don't assess ourselves the same way that we would nitpick and assess and fine tune things with a client. So I think that the advice would basically be like take a step back, that 30,000 foot view, and just make sure like, am I am I assuming something here, or did I really go through an assessment process to figure out what's going on? Because a lot of times our hunch is correct, but many times it's not as well. And if it's not improving, you want to make sure you get that extra set of eyes on you, and we need to do the same thing. I think one of the biggest changes probably in like in practice for me or for our providers with clients is like if someone comes in, they says, "Hey, Andrew, I have knee pain It particularly bothers me when I squat. Years ago, I probably would have said, okay, well, let's go through this assessment. Let's check your hip range of motion. Let's check your knee range of motion, your ankle. Let's do all these strength tests. And now, one of the first things that I would have the person do is, all right, well, let's watch you squat and let's see what we see. Like, let's jump right to the movement that you're having the
Mm,
issue with, and let's see if anything immediately jumps out at us. Because sometimes it's a strength or a movement or a mobility issue. Sometimes it's literally just you're not squatting with proper form. And
gotcha.
if we can, I guess the way we like to describe this is like first coach the movement before you start trying to unpack and like assess all these different things. Like first just like look at the movement that they're having issues with. And if it appears very obvious that like, oh, well, this makes sense that you might have knee pain because this is how you're squatting. Let's see if we can adjust and use some cues, adjust how you're doing the activity and see if it feels better.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's the case. And sometimes by us watching the person do the movement, it can speed up our assessment. Like we can see how certain joints are moving, and then we know, like, okay, I want to look at Rick's ankle because I can tell in his squat that his ankle's not really doing him any favors. So it kind of speeds you up, makes you more efficient, and helps you get to the bottom of it quicker for the person that's dealing with those symptoms.
Yeah, that's really fascinating because I'm sure a lot of people, as well as clinicians, probably skip that step one
I
and
used
just
to.
go right to the sort of the more the diagnostic clinician view of it to step two, three, and so on and so forth. So,
Yeah, I think the people that probably do it the best um, are people that are coaches of movement, like
mm,
someone who's a coach at a gym, for example, or a personal trainer. Um, they're usually going to look at the movement first, but because
yeah,
that's what they do. And a lot of times that's not what the physicians do. That's not what the physical therapists do. And I think if you can find someone that's like both of those things, they're a provider, they're an expert in what you're dealing with, and they know how to coach movement really well at a high level. Man, in a good way, that's like a very dangerous provider. Like
yeah.
they can be very effective with a lot of people.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for this information. This was great. One of the things I love most about these podcasts is that, certainly our listeners get a lot of good info, but I certainly do as well. So thank you so much. For our listeners that want to go check out the Physio Room, you can learn more about it at www.physioroomco.com. So Physio Rooms co.com. If any of our listeners are interested in a USCA certification, you can use the code ATE for $75 off. So thank you so much, Andrew, for your time on the call today. Thank you for your expertise. This was a great conversation. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. Appreciate you having me. And yeah, thanks all you guys that tuned in. Have a great day.
All right. Thank you.